Straight talk about the issues you care about the most. It's LaVeist and Claville, empowerment for the culture. Now, your hosts, Dr. Will LaVeist and Dr. Eric Claville.
Hey, I'm Will LaVeist. He's Eric Claville. You tune into LaVeist and Claville. We give it to you straight the way it is from a black male's perspective, because it's like that. That's the way it is. So let's get right to it. The show 2022, bound to be another challenging year, just like 2021 as the pandemic continues to rage on. But as long as God is on the throne, LaVeist and Claville will remain optimistic. So we're looking forward to an even better 2022. And I know for me personally, you know, one of the things that I'm planning to do in 2022 is get wedded up with my beautiful fiance. So, you know, as we look at big things happening, you know, we're going to continue to tackle the big issues that are most interest to our community. So the economy, you know, the law, the government, careers, religion, and of course, Black love, right? Because we love, most of all, we love Black people. So we're basically talking about news, culture, and politics, right, Claville?
Absolutely. You know, when we kicked off LaVeist and Claville over a year ago, you know, we said we wanted to deal with issues in the news and politics and culture. I mean, so if you go to our social media, that was really our first post and telling everyone about what LaVeist and Claville is all about. Now, of course, we've expanded and talked about other issues, but that's the core of who we are.
Mm-hmm.
You know, talking about it from a Black male perspective. We're going to continue that in 2022. As a matter of fact, you know, we kicked off the year of LaVeist and Claville on Martin Luther King Day, MLK holiday, and we took a look at where are we now.
Right.
You know, and a year later, you know, we're gonna continue to do that show and kick off our season, kick off the year on that day. That's the tradition of ours that we're going to carry on.
Right.
Well, you know, you mentioned being optimistic. Yes, as long as God is on the throne, we are. But sometimes you just shake your head.
Absolutely.
It seems like we're beating our heads against the same wall, going up the same hill, taking 2 steps up and coming 4 steps back down. You know, where are we now as African Americans? Where are we now as a country? Where are we now as a world? You know, where are we?
Yeah, you know, it's ironic that you say that, because I was thinking about how just the other day, you know, Sidney Poitier, the great actor, you know, hero to many, you know, passed just recently. And I know we're going to be talking more about that in the future show. But I was looking at his movie, you know, that he did with Bill Cosby, you know, getting a piece of the action. And there was a point in the movie, man, where I felt, you know, I got to admit, I got a little down, because if you know the storyline in the movie, and I would encourage folks to go and check it out. Yeah. It's a classic movie, you know, African-American movie. And it was a point in the movie, like I said, I felt a little down because they were talking about and addressing the same exact issues that we are confronted with now. And this is a movie that was, you know, filmed, or it was supposed to be staged and present in 75.
Wow.
You know, 1975, here we are in 2022. And what they were talking about, what they were addressing, if you just change the way the cars look, the way some of the styles look, that movie, exactly the way they did it, exactly the issues that they talked about, could be done today. So like you said, there are moments, man, where it's very easy to get pessimistic and say, man, you know, how far we've come, but how far have we really come? And it can be tough sometimes, especially when you see something like that. You see, you know, a movie that, you know, was such a part of my youth. And then very much so, the same exact issues they were confronting in that movie is what we see going on in our community now.
You know, you're talking about Uptown Saturday Night and Let's Do It Again. You know, 2 classics, you know, and of course, like you said, we're going to talk about the passing every year of our Black legends. And of course, we're going to talk about Max Julian and other screenwriters and other entertainers and other individuals within government, politics, policy, business, and just culture as a whole. Those that really added to who we are and continue to add to who we are.
Right.
Because like you said, well, it's interesting. We take a look at the past. When we take a look at the past, it's almost like the present. And it's almost a forecast of the future.
Right.
So, it's again, as a student of history and understanding how these things work, it's almost, again, like you said, you just shake your head to say, are we a dog chasing our tail? Is it just a bigger tail that we're chasing or a elaborate tail we're chasing, but are we still just chasing our tail?
Yeah, are we going in a wider circle? Instead of a close circle, are we going in a wider circle? But, that's why also, as a journalist, as a student of Black literature, and our culture, that's why it's so important to have a grounding in our heroes of the past, our literary giants, of the past and the present, because so many of the issues have been addressed, have been written about, have been given insight into. And so when you talk about the past often repeating itself in the form of the present or in the form of the future, a lot of times to help us to be able to deal with what we're confronted with now, a lot of times it's helpful to go back and look at what some of our heroes, men and women of the past wrote about and how they advised us and tried to encourage, our people to be able to address things. So, I gain inspiration a lot of times going back and looking at stuff written by James Weldon Johnson, stuff written by Langston Hughes, speeches by, Maria Stewart, who was the first womanist, the first political, women at her time, Black woman, giving political speeches, And when you start thinking about those things and what was going on in that context, a lot of times it can help you to be able to get through and to see that, our way forward and what we're dealing with now.
Absolutely. And then when we talk about politics, the second episode that we did in 2021 was expectation of a Biden-Harris administration. And Will, when you talk about history, I feel like we can do that show right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it's really an examination of where those expectations are. And we're grappling right now in 2022 on Capitol Hill with a lot of issues where some constituents are saying there are broken promises or promises that are unfulfilled.
Right.
Slice it whichever way you like. There's still issues that we need to deal with. And the question becomes, in politics, how do we take the campaign promises and the stump speeches to the people that you need votes from, and how do each of us hold them accountable in order to make sure that we get what we came for?
And the challenge is, it always seems that with the African American community, that there are these promises made, but then promises deferred. And it's like, so why is it that other communities, other constituencies seem to be able to get their promises, their issues addressed and put forth, but when it comes to the African American community, you get these delays, you get these empty promises. And that's one of the big criticisms of the Democratic Party and African Americans putting so much of our voting power into this one party that continues to seem to not take the vote to its fullest potential, to its fullest meaning, only essentially using the vote to get in office, but then not really delivering on what was promised. And then as African Americans, you look at the Republican Party, and you, with the changes and with the direction that is very blatantly going now, led by Trump and that whole Trump wing of the party, as an African American, you can't, in good conscience, see yourself associating with that kind of racism and misogyny, and that's going on over there. So oftentimes you find yourself, particularly if you're independent like I am, what are you picking between? You picking between Lucifer and Satan? What are your choices at this point? It's like the difference between growing up in the segregated North or the segregated South.
Yeah.
I mean, in both situations, you're not being treated like a full citizen of the United States, and you're still being restricted to being able to fully live life, liberty, and happiness. So these are challenges that we have to overcome these challenges, and that has been the history of us here in the United States as a people, continuing to fight against these barriers and to overcome them.
Well, look, let's stick right there in Washington and continue to look at politics. And the third show that we did in 2021 dealt with the Trump legacy. So when we talk about shows we could do again right now,
right?
That topic, the impact that he's had, for better, for worse, for good, for bad, right, continues to grow. It continues to have a lot of different nuances. It continues to go in many different directions.
Right.
And of course, over time, history becomes interpreted a little differently, right? Things happen immediately, you have an immediate response. But then over the course of time, you begin to look at things, and time passes, and as they say, that time heals all wounds, but there's still the scars of the wounds that are there. So we can, in 2022, we can still deal with, and we'll continue to deal with the Trump legacy, not just him, but the policies, the insurrection, how he changed politics, and how he changed the Republican Party to what it is now.
Yeah, because in a lot of ways, the change that he has done is really tapping into something that has always existed. He's tapped into, and I don't think that he strategically tapped into it in such a thoughtful way. I think that he, in many ways, stumbled upon it. He tapped into this undercurrent that has always been there within the white American political landscape. It's the same theme, it's the same strain that Barry Goldwater tapped into, some generations ago. It's the same strain that was there prior to that led to the, reemergence of a reestablishment of Jim Crow segregation after the Civil War. It's the same strain. It just, like you said, it just kind of takes different forms. But I think that he's tapped into that, and now it's become a little bit more normalized, and people have become more embracing and emboldened with it. And it's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out, whether it goes back into sort of a semi-dormant state, similar to what you had over with George Bush era, a little bit of Ronald Reagan, or is it going to be really, radical, more than the vein of Barry Goldwater and others before him. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
No, look, you're exactly right. And then the question becomes, will he survive again? Because now there are new charges, state charges in New York City, and things of that nature. So, like I said, we could talk about this just about every year, because the legacy continues to grow because of the impact itself. And it will, every year Black History Month rolls around, and it's an opportunity for us to recognize clearly the impact of Black culture, not just on Black people, but really on the world. I always like to say that American culture is really Black culture with a white face, the way it's marketed and the way you see it, and the indelible impact that Black Americans, more specifically, have had on the entire world.
Absolutely.
We talk about how, well, I've noticed there's only one form of music that you see in every country, and that's hip hop.
Well, my story. I've talked about it being on the streets, in Mongolia, and hearing hip hop in in Mongolia, I mean, of all places. So you're absolutely right. Black culture, very much original American culture of a mixture of uh, indigenous roots, a mixture, a mashup of European, obviously the African root being at the base, and you mash all of that together, and you come with this original American culture and art form. You see it in jazz. I mean, we see it in our cuisine. The first African American, the first American cuisine and chefs, celebrity chefs, were actually African Americans. Because of, again, being able to mash up and take from, Native American culture, take what they brought with their African culture, mixing that with the learnings of European cuisine and culture. I remember I wrote a piece about that during the commemoration of the 1619, in Virginia. So you're absolutely right. I mean, African American culture is, the original American culture, and we see it being exported all across the globe in its many different forms.
Absolutely. And then when we move toward, of course, Black History Month, we can delve into, the style of our Black ministers and our churches, the impact of our churches on not just the Black community, but all across the world, especially here in America. And then our HBCUs. Right. You and I are proud HBCU graduates, right. Of course, representing Lincoln University and Southern University, and also we've taught at HBCUs. I continue to serve at HBCU now, and just the impact that our HBCUs have had.
Right.
Now, not just on the Black community, but we'll talk about the impact that it's had across the world. As a matter of fact, the Black Lives Matter movement, the pandemic, really showed just how impactful HBCUs have been with and then the flood of philanthropy that came toward them.
Right. And I think, as we've talked about before, I think it's good that the rest of the nation and rest of the world, in fact, is seeing the positive impact of these institutions, that we are producing as much excellence, if not more, and doing it oftentimes with less. So if you're able to produce an equal level of excellence and to do it with fewer resources, that actually you're exceeding the bar.
Absolutely.
You're exceeding it. And so imagine what we could do with optimal resources. And I think that one of the things that I hope that we're seeing too, and we've talked about, is that we as alumni need to be supporting our universities. We need to be at the front lines of giving back to our universities. And I'm proud to say that right now, I mean, my fraternity, the chapter at Lincoln University of Pennsylvania, we're right in the middle of raising $100,000 for an endowment, for a scholarship, to be able to help students born in the Americas to be able to study over in Africa. Because two of our graduates, Kwame Nkrumah and Nnamdi Azikiwe, both presidents of Ghana and also Nigeria, respectively, were Lincoln alums. And so the scholarship, the endowed scholarship, is in honor of them, and they're both members of the fraternity, Phi Beta Sigma fraternity. So those are the kinds of efforts too, because when you want others to be able to give to your institution, one of the first questions they ask is, well, what's your alumni level of giving? And so we've got to be able to support our own, because if we don't support us, then how can we expect others to support us? And that's what many of the great institutions do. Alumni of Notre Dame support Notre Dame. Alumni of Harvard support Harvard. When they need something done, they need a building done, they go to one of the alums. And oftentimes it gets done. So we've got to develop that same kind of tenacity, that same kind of understanding too.
Well, we're continuing to develop it,
That's
because
right.
it is developed. But continue to push it, preach the narrative, tell our story.
That's right.
It's amazing what you're doing, and also your fraternity, and just think about that. Two individuals that studied at one HBCU
That's right.
in Pennsylvania, who are the same fraternity, have been presidents of two of the most influential nations on the largest continent in the world.
That's right. That's right. Inspired by African American culture, inspired by the African Americans and what we were able to do here as a people. So that again talks to your point about the culture and its impact across the globe.
I mean, if you look at it, we can go all the way back to Marcus Garvey, how he was inspired, by Booker T. Washington. And he, came, of course, he didn't have a chance to meet him. He wanted to, but he passed away before that time, Booker T. Washington, that is. But again, inspired, how the world was inspired by not just Barack Obama, but before him, Martin Luther King, and before that, many other great men and women, African Americans, that really blazed the trail. So valuing our culture, recognizing the impact of our culture, and ensuring that our culture stays intact. Absolutely. So, we'll delve into that. And, when we talk about people and society, 2022, we'll look at populism and socialism, right? Right now, we've got two extremes that are real, that I believe, Will, you and I, we've talked. I believe that if we don't pay attention to these two extremes, it'll be the cause of pulling our country back apart like we did during the Civil War. And that's populism and socialism. And what do we mean by that? Where we look at one group that are the have-nots that are having less of have-nots. So they're actually getting poor, less access to just basic living needs. And then populism, where you have those that become extremists and end up going into the U.S. Capitol after told not to come in, where you have some people that's reinterpreting history saying, oh, it was just like a regular tourist.
Yeah. They were just checking the place out, and this and the same people who talk about respect for law, respect for police, Blue Lives Matter. These are the same people who are spraying police with chemicals, who are hitting police over the head with flagpoles, and even worse. It's like, what's the cognitive dissonance going on here? Are we not able to see the contradiction here? That you're saying you are for law enforcement and you're for being a nation of laws, but yet you're willing to go and totally disrespect the law and ignore the law based on lie. It's incredible. And then the lawmakers are covering up for this. I mean, it's really remarkable, but shouldn't be shocking. Like you said, it's very much a threat to the health of the nation.
Absolutely. And that's why we need to deal with it. That's why we need to talk about it and really look at history, as we do, look at history, look at social behavior, interaction, and help to kind of forecast the future and what we need to deal with in order to make sure that our country, the institution, of course, we got R's, we got D's, we got independents, we got people that just don't care. But at the end of the day, all of us need to be institutionalists, because without the institution, we have nothing.
And that's what is really, I think, is a underlying thing. We're going to see more and more written about this, is that there has been a unraveling, a disrespect for institutions across the board. And I think that is very much at the core rumbling with what we're seeing happening on the surface. So, for example, a lot of people are turning away from the church as an institution. May still believe in God, may still believe in Jesus as a son of God, but as an institution, the church and its structures and all of that, there's a high level of distrust. We see people distrusting the institution of medicine, the medical institution, to the point where we have a major pandemic going on, has been going on for, we're going on more than 2 years now, it seems like, and people are still questioning the vaccine and the science behind the vaccine. And we're just seeing a disrespect and a unraveling distrust in journalism as an institution and higher education as an institution. So again, I think one of the keys, and there's going to be more coming out about this, is how when people begin not trusting their institutions that are supposed to be for the people, by the people, what do we have? What do we have left? We're just kind of left to, our own devices, and what we see with the internet is that people will fill their minds up with what they already believe.
Yeah.
They're not really looking for new information or to be challenged in thought. We see loads of people who are only inundating themselves with information that reinforces what they already believe. So they're looking more for affirmation than they are true information. And that's, and that's, again, that's a threat to the health of the nation. Absolutely.
And Will, there are two other areas that we're going to delve into in 2022 pretty hard. And that's economics and the black tax. When it all boils down to it, my fight, my mission, my life's work from here on to the grave is going to really be about education and economics.
Right.
Because, Will, without those two, any community fails, any society fails.
Absolutely.
But you have to have both of them, because you have all the education in the world and no economic opportunity, and you're just educated with nothing.
Right.
And if you have economic opportunity, but without the proper education or the know-how to utilize that, you're just like people that win the lottery and
end up broke.
Right. So we're going to delve and talk about how important those two areas are.
Right.
Especially to the Black community. And you and I, we've talked, and we're looking at how impactful it is for African Americans and young people, especially, to look at non-traditional areas of economic opportunity. Right. We've got Bitcoin, we've got cryptocurrency, we've got all these other areas where people are creating new streams of income, new areas of economic opportunity. I was about 5 years ago, who could create the best app?
Right.
Apps are still there, but you still have other areas that are being created out of that. So what is the benefit of African American community to get into those areas on the ground floor?
Right. And without information, instruction as to how to get into these areas or what are the budding areas to look at, is very difficult to know, because what we see happening now with the internet is information is being hidden right in front of our eyes right now. That's the whole thing in many ways that Trump is so emboldened about, is that, look, I can just lie right in front of their eyes and people will believe, as long as you can distract them like a 3-card Monte game, people won't believe the facts that's right in front of their faces. So we have all this access to information, like you just were saying, these different areas, new revenue streams, different areas of careers and opportunities being created. But when people only engage the distractions, just the aspect of TikToking that's just entertainment, or just the streaming of shows that's just about entertainment and not about information, then we miss the boat on these different opportunities. And like you said, there's a lot of new areas and new opportunities that are being created. And again, I shared that mission with you, that as a journalist, one of the things that I've always been able to come in contact, and we know as academics, is you get access to information and people who have information. And it can be so frustrating when you're trying to share, when you're like you and I, and you don't just want to hold on to the information just for yourself. You want to share because we want to see our people prosper. We want to see our families prosper, but it can become so frustrating when you're sharing information and people are staring at you like a deer in headlights, or not really listening and processing what you're saying, but they're quick to go and just gravitate and go do the entertainment stuff. Yeah. But those of us who have access to information, we have a responsibility to share that information. And I'm with you 100% on that we've got to talk about these issues and put it out there and talk to the people who want to hear it.
That's right. And lastly, in 2022, we're going to pick back up and delve into our Black Tax series. And Will, I want you to talk about the inspiration for the Black Tax because, you brought it to me and I thought it was brilliant and I thought it was something that we needed to do. And we're going to expand it in 2022 as well, from the podcast to an actual written book. What are your aspirations for 2022 in the Black Tax series?
Well, I mean, when I look at that, and some of you mentioned, like, for example, you mentioned Booker T. Washington, you mentioned Marcus Garvey. A lot of times in our community, we have had leaders who kind of articulated what are some of the issues and some of the things that we ought to be focused on as a people. They articulated and inspired people to move in a particular direction. You may not have had to agree with them on all of the issues. No man is going to or woman is going to agree with everything someone says. But the benefit of having leaders or identified national leaders is they had that ability to kind of articulate what we ought to be focusing on. And you mentioned about economics. Well, when Martin Luther King went off the scene, when he was assassinated, he was talking about that very thing, the need to build wealth, to focus on economic opportunity and equity, right? And so unless we start to talk about these issues and the barriers that still exist and how to overcome the barriers, we are just going to continue to find ourselves wake up one morning and be totally left behind and have missed the boat. And that's what I see a lot of the Black Tax series being about. What are these barriers? What are these different areas of inequity that continue to exist? How do we deal with them on a personal level, on a community level, and how we overcome them? And sharing stories, because we all have different stories of situations that we've dealt with, microaggressions, outright racism, outright being prevented from being able to excel in your career. But we also have stories of how people have overcome, how we've overcome. So we want to be able to bring the people and give them sort of that direction. So when they're feeling stuck and they say, "Whoa, wow, what is happening here?" They can help and refer and see, well, this may be what it is that you're dealing with, and here's how you can overcome that, and then here's how you can pay that forward to help somebody else overcome it as well.
Absolutely. What I tell all my mentees is understand where you come from, pay it forward, and pay it back. If you do those three things, no matter what you learn, wherever you go, you always ensure that you recreate that which you are.
Exactly.
Well, I'm looking forward to 2022 with you and looking forward to 2022 with LaVeist and Claville. We want to thank all of you that's joined us for this segment. Continue to tune in the year 2022. We'd like to thank our producer, Ben Bailey, who keeps us on the right track and professional in all that we do. His hand is behind it. So thank you, Ben, for your work. So continue to support us. Go to our social media at LaVeist and Claville. That's at LaVeist and Claville. And go back and take a look at things that we've done. So to us, it's like that, and that's the way it is. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to another episode of LaVeist and Claville. Make sure you subscribe so you'll never miss an episode. For information or to connect with LaVeist and Claville, check out our website at www.laveistclaville.com. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to @the LaVeist and Claville on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. This has been the latest episode of LaVeist and Claville.